All right, gang, we are going to go over our notes from Lesson 3.2a, Parallel Lines and Transversals. We're going to learn how all of these things are related. So to start out, I want you to write down your goal for the day. Our goal here in these notes is to identify a transversal and know how the 5 angle pairs are related when the lines are parallel. They are all still named the way we learned them in the beginning, but now they actually are going to end up with some special relationships. We're going to do some measurings to see if we can figure out how those are. So, we'll get down here to our notes. I have some steps here, 1 through 5. We're going to go through these, and we're going to see if we can figure this out. The first thing that I want you to do in your notes would be to measure the 4 angles at the top of the diagram. So those are the 4 angles that we have up here at the top. Those angles are 1, 2, 3, and 4. Don't write those in, but those are the 4 angles that we're going to measure. To measure those angles, we are going to use a protractor. I know that you are probably doing these notes at home and you don't necessarily have a protractor, so I'm going to go through this with you and you can write down what I get on my notes. So now, a protractor is what we use to measure angles. Notice that we can measure our angles using either set of numbers. If we look at our protractor, we have 0 on the outside right there. So if we're measuring an angle going up this way, we would use the outside numbers. And then we also have a 0 on the inside. So if we have an angle opening up this way, we would measure on the inside of the protractor. Now, the way we look at this protractor right now, we notice that that black line does not reach the protractor. We can do one of a couple things. Because this is on my smartboard, I can make my protractor a little bit smaller. And then we can measure that. And you notice if I measure up, it's a little hard to see, but if I measure up, my angle is going like this. So I would measure on the outside, and I measure right there to that angle. A little bit blurry on our notes here, but it does say 10, 20, 30, 40, and 50 degrees. So that angle right there measures 50 degrees. Then if I want to measure the angle on the other side, that would be this angle right here, I would have to start on the bottom here, and now I have to start with the inside numbers, and I would measure this way. And I'm not quite sure if you can see it. 90 is straight up in the middle, and then there's 100, 110, 120, and 130. So on the inside, we have 130 degrees. And that makes sense because 130 plus 50 makes 180. That's a straight line. So those numbers all work. Now, if I take my protractor out of there, I can do a couple things. I do know that vertical to this 50 right here, I have the angle on the other side right here. Those two guys are equal to each other. That makes this angle down here 50 degrees. Same on the other side. Vertical to the 130, I have this angle on this side, and those guys add up to, or are equal to each other, so that also is 130 degrees. If I did take my protractor, I could spin it around, and I could put it on the bottom, and I even can make it a little bit bigger so we can see a little bit better. Notice that the blue angle on the bottom right here, starting at 0, does go up to 50 degrees right there, and the red angle on the left, starting at 0, does go up to 130 degrees. So everything that we talked about, everything that we learned, all makes sense. And we have all of those angles measured. I'm going to get rid of some of this extra stuff so it doesn't get too confusing. Get those guys out of there. And now we're going to move on to step number 2. It says draw a second horizontal line parallel to the top line. Because this is notebook paper, all of the lines are parallel. So I'm going to go down below and pick any line that I want. It doesn't matter. And I'm going to draw a horizontal line right there. You can draw it wherever you want. It doesn't matter. I went down 1, 2, 3, 4. I went down 5 lines. You can go down however many you want. Draw the horizontal line. Then I want you to find the measure of each of the 4 new angles. So we're going to take our protractor. I'm going to spin this guy around so it's upside right. I'm going to put it on right here, and we're going to measure again. And again, I'm measuring my angles. I'm measuring the angle on the left first, and those numbers are, I have to start at 0 right here, and I measure up to right there, and I notice 50 degrees. If I measure the angle on the right, I know that it should be 130 because I already have 150, and that's a linear pair. But again, I'm starting at 0 on the inside, and I'm measuring around here, and there is my 130 degrees. So there are my 2 angles. If I took my protractor and spun it around, oops, bring that guy back up there where we were, spin that guy around, and notice I get the exact same information that I had before. Right here, I get 50 degrees, and on the other side, I get 130 degrees. Everything turns out to be exactly the same. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of some of this extra information. Get rid of all this. Get rid of all this. And let's move on to our next step. Oops. It says, compare your answers with your neighbors. Now, you're working at home, you don't have any neighbors, so clearly our problems look the same because we work them together. We can skip that. And then we have to see, the directions say, see if anyone needs help. We're on our own, we're working together. And then if you go down to the bottom, it says, what do you notice? Does your picture look exactly like your neighbor's? Skip that. Are your angle measures different? Skip that. What is the geometry word for same? We can fill that in. What is the word for same? That would be congruent. And then which special angle pairs are congruent and which special angle pairs are supplementary? Now, if we take this information and bring it to the bottom of the page, we're going to draw some conclusions. So let me take my picture that we had, and I just copied it. You still have it on your notes up there. But there is the picture that we had. Let's draw some conclusions about the special angle pairs that we have named in the past. All right, the first thing that I notice about all of these angles is that we have these 130s right here on the inside. And if we think about what those kinds of angles are, those are the angles that make the Z right here. And those are called the alternate interiors. And we notice that the alternate interior angles are congruent to each other. And it turns out, if we make our Z the other way, the 50s are also equal to each other. Alternate interior angles are equal. If we look at the other angles that are on the inside, and that would be that 50 right there. Let me get those guys out of there. And that 130 right there. Those are the other pair of angles that we have learned about. Those angles are no longer congruent, but they do make that C that we talked about. And the C, remember, are the consecutive interior angles. So we have consecutive interior angles, no longer congruent, but 180 degrees. They are supplementary to each other. Those are the interior angles that we dealt with. Then we have the angles that are outside of the lines. Let me get rid of some of this extra information. All these lines. The angles that are on the outside, I have this 130 up on top, and I have the 130 on the bottom. And those guys right there are exterior angles, and they are alternate because notice they are on different sides of the transversal. One is on the left and one is on the right. Those are our alternate exterior angles. And those are also congruent to each other. Notice 130, 130. If you look at the other exterior angles, let me leave that there. Let me get the blue dots out of there. Look at the other exterior angles, the 130 and the 50, the ones on the same side of the transversal, those are no longer congruent to each other. They are supplementary. So we're going to fill that in. We have consecutive. Consecutive exterior angles. Those equal 180 degrees. The last pair of angles that we talked about, and this is the pair of angles that has the most combinations, are not interior or exterior. Those are the ones that fall in the same corner. So 130, sorry, the 50 and the 50. Those are the angles that make the F. Those are the corresponding angles. And that first pair that I have, notice that they are both equal to each other. If I flip that over and I do the corresponding angles on the other side, the 130 below and below right there, notice I have my backwards F outlining those two angles right there. Those are also 130. All corresponding angles are always going to be congruent to each other. So these are the relationships that you need to make sure that you know. These are for sure things that you're going to see on the test. So I'm going to mark this guy right here, study for the test, make sure that you know all of those. The ones that are probably the most important would be the alternate interiors, the consecutive interiors, and the corresponding angles. Those are the ones that we use the most often in all of the homework that we do, but it is important to use all of these because everything that you know always makes everything easier. So what I'm going to have you do now is pause your video. You can try the rest of your notes. If you get stuck on any practice problems, you can check out the practice video. Otherwise, you can jump into your homework and see if you can figure that out. Good luck. See you in class.